I didn't mind the late shifts. They gave me something to do, something to keep my brain from spiraling. After Dad bailed and disappeared down to Florida with some woman we never met, Mom was left working double shifts at the care home just to keep the lights on. I tried to help where I could, picked up shifts between classes, delivered pizzas, whatever paid. It wasn't ideal, but it beat sitting around thinking. That night felt routine. Mid-October, sky spitting a light drizzle, streets quiet like they always got after 8. I was just about to clock out when my manager called my name and waved a slip of paper at me. Large sausage. Paid online. Hendrick Street. Suite 5B. I glanced at the address. It didn't sound familiar, but that wasn't unusual. I delivered to every kind of place you could think of: dorms, motels, construction trailers. One time a guy had me drop a pie on the hood of his car in the middle of a dirt lot and just drove off. I shoved the pizza into the warmer bag and headed out to the Mazda, my mom's old beater that rattled if you turned too hard. Punched the address into maps. 20 minutes west, just outside Canton, near the industrial zone I usually sped past on the highway. As I got closer, the lights grew fewer and farther between. Street lamps flickered or were completely dead. Old warehouses lined the road like crooked teeth, most of them boarded up or tagged with spray paint. The GPS told me I'd arrived just as I rolled into a cracked asphalt lot. I parked. The place looked like a skeleton. The sign above the building was busted in half, and weeds tall enough to brush the front bumper swayed in the wind. One of the garage doors was halfway open, jammed crooked like someone gave up mid-lift. A single orange lamp buzzed overhead, casting the whole place in this sick, jaundiced glow. I sat there for a second, watching the rain beat up on the windshield. Something about the place made me want to turn around. But it was a prepaid order, and tips had been garbage all night. I stepped out, slamming the door shut behind me. The pizza bag felt warm against my chest, even through the chill. There was no front entrance, no welcome mat, no doorbell. Just corrugated metal and silence. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. A rustling sound came from inside, then a voice, rough, older. "Dursticks. Come in, kid." I paused. Every training video I'd ever seen said the same thing. Don't go inside. If they won't come out, you leave the food and walk. But the voice came again. Legs busted. Just inside the bay. I stood there in the drizzle, looking at that crooked garage door. It was maybe 2 steps inside. Just a quick drop-off. I knew it was dumb, but I didn't want to argue with some injured guy over 2 steps and a $15 pizza. So I stepped inside. The air changed the second I crossed the threshold. It was colder inside, still and heavy, like the place had been sealed for years. The concrete floor was coated in a fine layer of dust that stuck to my sneakers. One hanging lamp over a cluttered workbench gave off the only light, casting long shadows across the bay. Everything beyond that glow melted into darkness. I spotted him near a hydraulic lift, a man in his late 50s maybe, wearing a grubby ball cap and a windbreaker over cargo shorts, which didn't make sense in this kind of cold. He leaned on a crutch and motioned to a folding table nearby. "Put it there," he said, voice low and casual. "Tips in the lid." I took a few steps forward, trying to stay in the light. Something about this felt off. Then I caught a glimpse of the name stenciled on the metal tool cabinet beside him, Kowalski Auto Repair. But the order ticket had a different name, Jacob Sellers. That buzzed in my head for half a second before something behind me moved. A voice, younger, quieter, asked, "Need help?" I spun around. There was a second guy, younger than the first, maybe mid-20s, standing just beyond the lamp's reach. Hood up, jeans torn at the knees. I hadn't even heard him come in. He smiled, and it was too wide, like he was in on a joke I hadn't heard. Before I could say a word, something hard jabbed me in the back, metallic and cold, and then plastic zip ties whipped around my wrists. Tight. Too tight. My fingers went numb almost immediately. "Phone," the older guy barked, stepping closer. I struggled, trying to twist away, but it was useless. The man reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out my phone. He tossed it to the kid, who swiped the screen and flipped on airplane mode. "Let's move," the older one said. I was marched across the garage, shoes slipping slightly on oil-stained concrete, toward a rusted metal stairwell that led down into blackness. I tried to remember everything: how many steps, the sound of our shoes, the way the air got damp and colder as we descended. The basement was a single cinder block room, about 10 feet across, with a naked bulb hanging from a wire above. It smelled like motor oil and wet cardboard. There was a metal eye bolt drilled into the floor near the wall. They tied my ankles and then looped rope from my wrists down through the bolt and back up again, cinching it tight. I couldn't move, couldn't stand, could barely even shift without the rope biting in. The older guy crouched beside me, his knees cracking. "Your mom's number," he said, holding up my phone and tapping record. "Say it right." I stared at him, my jaw clenched, but I gave it to him. What choice did I have? He tapped it into his own burner phone, hit dial, and waited. The speaker clicked on. Then I heard her voice, small, steady. "Hello." The kid stepped forward and spoke. "We've got your son. $10,000. You've got 15 minutes to call back and say yes. Then you'll get the drop instructions." He ended the call before she could respond. They left me alone in that concrete box, a small space heater buzzing in the corner, throwing pale light into the dust. I stared at the floor and tried not to scream. I don't know how long I sat there, 10 minutes, 30, maybe more. Time stretched in that room. The heater ticked and rattled like it was falling apart, but it did just enough to keep the air from freezing. My wrists throbbed where the zip ties dug in, and every time I shifted, the rope burned against my skin. I kept thinking about Mom, about what she must have felt hearing that call. We didn't have 10 grand. We barely had 300 in the checking account last time I looked. The thought of her scrambling, trying to find help, made my chest twist in a way I couldn't describe. I wanted to believe she'd call the police, but part of me was terrified she'd try to fix it herself, that she'd do something desperate. I tried to loosen the ties. Wiggled, pulled, angled my body to drag the space heater closer with my heel. Maybe the heat would weaken the plastic. It didn't. All I got was hot air blowing against my shoes and the slow hum of my own panic climbing higher. Then I heard footsteps. They weren't rushing, just steady and heavy on the stairs. The older guy came first, phone in hand. He held it up and clicked the speaker on. The voice that came through was familiar and shaky. "I have the money. Please, just don't hurt him." It was her. Mom. The man didn't respond right away. He just let the silence hang before finally speaking. "Riverfront. 9th Street. Behind the blue dumpster at the end of the alley. You've got until 9. Drop the bag. Walk away. One wrong move, the boy gets to meet the rats." And that was it. He hung up. After that, they barely acknowledged me. They stayed upstairs, playing music through some cracked Bluetooth speaker, gritty 90s rock with the volume low, like they didn't want to disturb whatever plan they thought they had. The younger one scrolled through my phone. I could hear him laughing at something, probably that selfie I had with Mr. Pickles, our fat orange tabby. He tossed the phone onto the workbench like it was nothing. I checked the time by the faint light on the wall. It had to be close to 8:45. Then I heard something new. A thump, not from the basement, but overhead. Sharp and deep, like a box being knocked over. The kid froze. He turned his head slightly, listening. Another thump followed, closer now, maybe just outside the stairwell door. He cursed under his breath, drew a knife from his belt, and turned toward me, not like he was going to use it, but like he didn't know what else to do. His eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling. The door at the top of the stairs slammed open. Silence. Then a voice rang out, deep and firm. "Police. Show your hands." The kid panicked. He spun toward me, blade still up, but his foot hit a slick patch of oil and he went down hard. Before he could recover, boots thundered down the stairs, 2 officers, rifles raised, shouting commands. One went for the kid. The other came straight to me, knife in hand, not to harm, but to cut me free. In seconds, the rope dropped from my wrists. They replaced the zip ties with softer plastic cuffs, standard for rescue, and helped me to my feet. As we came up the stairs, I saw the older guy face down on the floor, hands behind his back, knees pinned by 2 more cops. Outside, a black van idled, side door hanging open, engine running, empty. A female detective stood near the squad SUV. She wrapped a foil space blanket around my shoulders, handed me a paper cup of lukewarm gas station coffee, and told me what had happened. Mom had gone straight to the Canton PD. They packed a duffel with shredded newspaper, slipped in a GPS tracker, and had plainclothes officers stake out the drop site. When the older man picked it up, they boxed in the van and got him to talk. They found me 20 minutes later. Mom showed up not long after, breathless and pale, but alive and safe. When she hugged me, the coffee sloshed down my arm, but I didn't care. I just held on. We stayed at the station till sunrise, giving statements. At 6 a.m., they finally let us leave. The Mazda groaned on the way home, but it was the best sound I'd ever heard. I quit Marco's the next morning. Haven't delivered a damn thing since. Most nights, The end of shift feels like a quiet slide into nothing. A couple of speeding tickets, maybe a noise complaint or two. But that night, it hit different. I was about 30 minutes from wrapping up, cruising the outer loop near Westbridge, where the road stretches long and empty past old farmhouses and beat-up fences. The radio was mostly dead, just background static and a weather update I barely heard. It was past 1:30 a.m., and I was running on bad coffee and half a granola bar. Then I saw him. Black Dodge Charger. No front plate. Drifting into the oncoming lane for just a second. Nothing wild, but enough to catch my eye. As I passed, the driver jerked it back into place like he'd just realized what he was doing. Gut instinct kicked in. I did a U-turn, flipped the lights, and followed. The car didn't bolt, but it didn't exactly pull over right away either. It rolled another 100 yards, then eased into the gravel entrance of an old property that looked like nobody'd lived there in years. I parked behind him and clicked my body cam on. As I stepped out, I radioed it in. Dispatch, this is Unit 17. I've got a black Dodge Charger, Tennessee Plate Tango, X-ray 4-9-1. Driver swerved lanes, pulled over on Hollow Pine Drive, near marker 82. Requesting backup. Possible impaired driver. I approached slowly. My flashlight bounced off the rear bumper, catching streaks of dirt and what looked like a dent above the taillight. The driver's window was already halfway down. Evening, I said, doing my best not to sound tense. You doing all right tonight? Guy looked to be late 20s, maybe 30. Black male, dreads tied back, hoodie zipped up halfway. He nodded once. Yeah, just tired. Long night. License and registration, please. He reached into the glove box and handed over a license and a folder. The name read Kenneth Hartwell. The car was registered to a woman with the same last name. Probably his mother. Where you headed? Back home. Just dropped off my cousin. I nodded, not pressing yet. There was a smell, though, not strong, but enough to notice. Weed. Faint, but there. You smoke tonight? He looked me dead in the eye. Nah, I don't mess with that. I kept my face flat. Hang tight for me. Back at my cruiser, I ran his info. Everything came back clean. But the smell, the swerving, the way he kept glancing at his mirrors like he was keeping track of something, it all felt off. I called in again. Unit 17. Still on Hollow Pine. Requesting ETA on backup. Copy. Unit 14 en route, 5 minutes out. I popped the door, stepped back out, and walked to the Charger again. Sir, I'm going to ask you to step out of the vehicle. He didn't move. I'm not under arrest, right? No, sir. Not yet. I just need you to step out so we can talk, and I can make sure everything's safe. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. I told you I'm fine. Then this won't take long. Still nothing. His right hand dropped low, near the center console. I took a step back and rested my hand on the taser. Sir, I need you to keep your hands visible. Now. The sound of tires on gravel behind me made me glance back. Backup was here. Officer Howard pulled up fast and stepped out before his engine even finished idling. He saw my stance and didn't ask questions. Just drew his taser and stepped to the passenger side. Out of the vehicle, now, Howard ordered, voice sharp. Still nothing. This wasn't tired anymore. This was defiance. And something in me knew it wasn't just about weed. Something worse was coming. I just didn't know what yet. Howard didn't wait. He gave another loud warning. Last chance. Out of the car. Then fired the taser through the open window. The prongs hit square. I saw them stick. But Kenny barely flinched. Just twitched, blinked, and stared straight ahead like nothing had happened. What the hell? Howard muttered. I moved to the driver's side, yanked the door open, and reached for the seatbelt. Kenny shoved my arm away, hard, stronger than I expected. I nearly lost my footing in the gravel. Howard fired again. This time Kenny shouted, thrashed, grabbed the door, and slammed it shut in my face. I heard the lock click. I backed off fast and shouted, Get out of the vehicle now. Hands where I can see him. No response. Howard circled behind me, frustration building. You want to do this the hard way? He yelled, already reloading the cartridge. I gritted my teeth and pulled on the handle, still locked. Kenny sat frozen, breathing heavy now, eyes darting between us and the rearview mirror. Howard fired the taser a third time through the glass, which finally got a reaction. Kenny screamed, then kicked the door open so fast I stumbled backward. He bolted, right past Howard, right into the darkness. I ran after him, but he was fast, Too fast. All I saw was the blur of that hoodie vanishing into the tree line beside the road. I yelled into my radio, suspect fleeing on foot, northbound into the woods, off Hollow Pine. Howard chased after him a few yards before stopping, hands on his knees. "Damn, he's gone," he gasped. "Guy runs like a deer." I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. My arm ached where he'd shoved me. My wrist was bleeding from when I hit the doorframe. I hadn't even noticed until now. More units arrived within minutes. Flashlights, radios, boots stomping through brush. Dogs. Drones. Nothing. Kenny Hartwell vanished into the woods like he was never there. They loaded me into a cruiser to get checked out. I sat in the passenger seat, window cracked, staring out at the trees. Still hearing his footsteps. Still hearing that taser crackle and fail. I kept asking myself the same thing over and over. What the hell just happened? And where the hell did he go? The next morning felt unreal. I sat on the edge of a hospital bed with gauze taped to my wrist and a half-empty 4-bag dripping somewhere above me. The room was quiet except for a hallway intercom crackling now and then. A nurse had come in earlier, said I was lucky. Minor sprains, surface cuts. Adrenaline's a hell of a thing, she said, like it was supposed to make me feel better. But my head wasn't on the bruises. It was still out there, somewhere in the woods, chasing the sound of Kenny Hartwell's footsteps as he vanished between the trees. They didn't find him that night. Or the next day. We had dogs out. Drones. A whole rotation of state troopers walking grid patterns in the backwoods behind Hollow Pine. Nothing. No torn hoodie. No dropped phone. No footprints worth tracking in that bone-dry dirt. Word got out fast. Local news picked it up by noon. Man flees police after violent stop. Suspect still at large. They showed the Charger being towed, played my radio call on loop like it was some war documentary. They never mentioned my name, but people knew. The department sent out a formal statement. My captain told me to take a few days off. "You did what you were trained to do," he said. "You kept it from getting worse." Did I? The city offered a $10,000 reward for tips. Kenny's face started showing up on convenience store bulletin boards and social media flyers. Every officer in Knox and the 5 surrounding counties had his profile memorized by the end of the week. I stayed home the first 2 days, icing my arm and barely sleeping. I kept running through it in my head. Every second, every command I gave, every hesitation. I replayed the moment he looked at me, like he knew he had a window and I didn't see it coming. Day 3, I drove out to Hollow Pine. I didn't mean to, not really. I just ended up there. Sat in my car at the edge of the same gravel turnout, engine idling, lights off. The air smelled like wet leaves and pine sap. Nothing moved. It looked so normal. Day 4, a call came in from Oak Ridge. A guy matching Kenny's description was spotted entering a low-rent apartment building, the kind with broken mailboxes and trash piling up near the stairwells. SWAT moved fast. I wasn't allowed to ride along, not cleared yet. So I waited at the station, pacing, phone in hand, heart pounding like I was the one they were going in for. An hour later, the call came in. He's in custody. No resistance. They found him hiding in a basement laundry room with a duffel bag full of burner phones, a couple stacks of cash, and a loaded .38. No weed. No ID. Not a single word out of him since they cuffed him. When I heard, I sat down on the locker room bench and just stared at the floor. I should have felt relieved, grateful, maybe even vindicated. But all I felt was tired. Like I'd spent 5 days trying to outrun something that was still sitting in my chest. He was caught. But the question that haunted me most wasn't how he got away. It was why it took me so long to see he would. They didn't get much out of Kenny after the arrest. He clammed up during the ride back to Knoxville, just stared out the window like the whole thing bored him. Didn't ask for a lawyer. Didn't deny a thing. He just sat there, calm as a stone, like this was all some movie he'd already seen. The detectives said he barely blinked during the interview. No anger. No panic. When they asked why he ran, he just shrugged. Said, "Wasn't my night to get caught." They found burner phones in his bag. One had texts from numbers tied to 3 different burglary cases across the county. Another had maps and addresses marked. One of them was mine. That hit harder than I let on. I went back on shift the following Monday. They eased me into it, quiet neighborhoods, routine patrols. But I wasn't the same. Everything felt sharper. I noticed things I never used to. The way people looked at my badge, the hesitation in their voice when I approached their car, even how my own hand hovered longer over my holster when someone moved too fast. The first night I was cleared to patrol solo again, I made a slow loop through Hollow Pine. I didn't mean to, but the car just kind of steered that way. Same gravel pull-off. Same busted fence and tree line. I sat there, window cracked, cruiser lights off, watching the trees shift in the wind. For a second, I swore I heard footsteps again, like echoes burned into the place. But it was just the wind. A few days later, the DA called. Kenny was taking a plea deal, resisting arrest, assault on a peace officer, possession of an unlicensed firearm. 12 years, no trial. No spotlight. I should have been glad. Case closed. Wrap it up. Instead, I found myself checking my side mirror more often, leaving lights on when I got home, flinching every time a Charger rumbled past in traffic. One night, I caught myself staring at a guy pumping gas, tall, dreadlocks, hoodie, and my hand was already on the door handle before I realized it wasn't him. Wrong face. Wrong time. My pulse still didn't slow down for 10 minutes. That's the thing no one tells you. It's not just the night it happens. It's every night after. I needed out. That was the only thought running through my head as I slammed the lid on my laptop and stared at the blank wall of my studio apartment in Brooklyn. Emails were piling up, clients were complaining, and every time I closed my eyes I saw error messages and sprint deadlines. My brain felt like it was wrapped in static. So I booked the cabin. It wasn't fancy, just some Airbnb listing in the Catskills, 2.5 hours north of the city. Perfect for solo getaways, the description said. Doug and Rita were the hosts. 5 stars. Lots of kind words from people named Lisa and Trent and Jin K. from Long Island. It was remote, no neighbors, no TV, and barely any cell service. That was the point. I packed light. 1 backpack. A book I kept meaning to finish. A hoodie, jeans, thermals, and the kind of boots you only wear when you want to feel rugged. The drive up was beautiful. November was just hitting its stride. Those golden and red leaves clinging to the last branches, mountain fog curling over the road like smoke. By the time I reached Wyndham, the sun was starting to drop behind the ridgeline, casting the hills in amber. Doug met me in the driveway. White beard, flannel shirt, old-school demeanor. Rita stood in the doorway, gave a small wave, but didn't come out. Doug walked me through the place. 1-bedroom cabin, propane heater, a tiny fridge stocked with chili and beer, and a laminated printout on how to reset the solar inverter if the lights flickered. He pointed toward the woods and said, "No cell towers for a few miles. If you need anything, we're just up the hill." I thanked him. He nodded once and left. For a while, it was perfect. I heated the chili, sat on the old couch with a blanket around my shoulders, and let the silence do its work. No traffic, no sirens, just wind and trees and the faint creak of the cabin settling. Around 11, I stepped outside for a smoke. I don't smoke much, just when I'm trying to think, or trying not to, but something about the cold air and the stillness made it feel right. I leaned against the porch rail, cigarette glowing soft in the dark, and looked out into the woods. That's when I saw it. A flicker of light, deep between the trees. Faint, moving, like someone walking with a lantern, or maybe a flashlight pointed low. It bobbed once, then vanished. I stood there for a while, holding my breath. Maybe a hunter, I thought, or maybe just a reflection off some far-off porch light. I flicked the cigarette into the dirt, went inside, and locked the door without really thinking about it. Then I sat back down, but I didn't open the book. I just listened. And the longer I listened, the more I noticed something strange about that silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. I left the lamp on when I went to bed. I told myself it was just because I didn't want to stub my toe in the dark if I had to get up. But really, it was that flicker, that weird little light in the trees. The way it had moved, not fast, not like someone searching for something, more like they already knew exactly where they were going. The heater hummed steadily. The cabin creaked and popped like old wood does in the cold. I scrolled through my phone for a few minutes, but the signal had dropped to 1 shaky bar, barely enough to load an email, definitely not enough to stream anything. I gave up and let the screen go black. I dozed off somewhere around midnight. But something woke me. I didn't know what at first. No crash, no voice, no alarm. Just a shift. The kind that makes your eyes snap open before your brain knows why. The lamp was still on. The room looked the same. But outside, through the narrow window above the sink, I thought I saw motion, low and slow, just past the tree line. I sat up and held my breath. Then I heard it. Voices. Far off. Not shouting. Just talking. Like two people walking together, having a conversation too low to make out. I couldn't tell where it was coming from. Maybe behind the cabin, maybe deeper out toward the ridge, but it was there. No mistaking it. I crossed the room slowly and peeked out the window. Just trees. Darkness layered on darkness. But I could still hear them. A few minutes later, they stopped. No footsteps. No slamming doors. Just quiet again. Too quiet. I told myself it was nothing. Hikers. Maybe locals walking their property lines. Whatever. I climbed back into bed, pulled the blanket over my head like a child, and told myself I'd laugh about it in the morning. I didn't. Because when the sun came up, I stepped outside for some air and saw something that made my stomach tighten. Fresh tire tracks on the gravel road. Not mine. I hadn't heard another car. No engines. No crunch of tires on gravel. But someone had been there. Someone else. I stood there in the cold for a long time, staring down the trail like it might give me an answer. It didn't. It just stood there, quiet, still, and watching. I didn't have much of an appetite that morning. I made a half-hearted attempt to eat the leftover chili from the fridge, but it tasted off, too salty, or maybe it was just my nerves screwing with my senses. I stared out the cabin window as I chewed, watching the trees sway in slow motion. The tire tracks were still fresh, still pressed deep in the soft dirt like someone had come and gone during the night, while I was curled up under a blanket, trying not to breathe too loud. By noon, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting. Maybe Doug had driven down to check something and didn't want to bother me. Or maybe another guest had gotten turned around near the property line. The cabin did have good reviews. Nobody mentioned anything weird. I opened the cabin's guest book. Just a bunch of happy little messages written in bubbly cursive. So peaceful. Perfect couples getaway. Love the stars. I didn't leave a note. That afternoon, I went for a short walk down the driveway to try and calm my nerves. I didn't go far. Every step I took past the tree line made my skin prickle. The woods felt off, like walking through a room that had just been argued in. Still and charged with something unspoken. I made it back to the porch just as the wind started to pick up again. I stayed inside after that. Didn't even light the fireplace. I just wrapped myself in a blanket and sat on the floor near the heater, trying not to listen too hard. But of course I did. Because at exactly 12:57 a.m., I heard the voices again. This time, they were closer. I moved to the kitchen window and stared out, but the forest swallowed everything. I couldn't see them, only hear them. Slow, even footsteps crunching leaves. 2 people, maybe 3. Not in a rush. No flashlights. Then something snapped, like a branch breaking under weight, and the footsteps stopped. I stood in that kitchen, barefoot on cold wood, heart pounding in my chest like a drum. I wanted to yell. Wanted to turn on every light and make it clear I was awake. I was aware. I was not the kind of guest you sneak up on. But I didn't. Instead, I locked the front door, dragged a chair in front of it like that would help, and sat there until sunrise with a kitchen knife in my lap. I didn't sleep. Not even for a minute. By dawn, I'd made up my mind. I was leaving. Early or not. No refund was worth staying another night in that place. I packed up fast. Book, charger, the clothes I never unpacked. I shoved the keys into the lockbox, climbed into the Mazda, and peeled out of the gravel driveway like someone was chasing me. When I reached the turn at the bottom of the hill, Doug was there. Just standing. No wave. No smile. No suitcase or tools or trash bag. Just him, in the same flannel shirt from the day I arrived, hands in his pockets, watching my car roll past. He didn't move. Didn't blink. I didn't stop. Didn't roll down the window. I just kept driving. Kept driving until trees turned into buildings and the air stopped feeling like it could hold a secret. Kept driving until I could finally let out the breath I didn't even know I'd been holding. But even back in Brooklyn, that feeling never really left. A week later, I saw the article. I wasn't looking for it, just scrolling through local news while eating lunch at my desk, trying to feel normal again. But there it was. Man missing in Catskills after responding to online gear sale. They didn't name the exact location. Just said he was last seen near Wyndham. Met up with someone about buying a used ATV. Never came back. His car was found pulled off on a logging trail. Doors locked. Keys still in the ignition. At first, I didn't move. I just stared at the headline like it was some bad déjà vu. I clicked the story. Read it twice. The man was 35. Lived in Albany. Texted a friend saying he was heading out for a quick pickup, and then Nothing. That cold feeling from the cabin came rushing back, fast and sharp. The voices. The tire tracks. Doug just standing there at the edge of the woods like he was waiting for something else. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to call the cops and sound like some city guy with an overactive imagination, but I also couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. So I emailed the reporter who wrote the story. I told them what I'd seen, what I'd heard, the weird vibe. I even gave the cabin listing, though when I checked, it was already gone. 2 days passed. Then I got a call. It was a deputy from Greene County. Calm voice, polite. He thanked me for reaching out, asked a few questions, then said they'd be in touch if they needed anything further. Then, almost like an afterthought, he said, "Just so you know, we did find something." I sat up straighter. What? There was a structure about half a mile off the main trail behind the property, hidden under camo tarps. Inside, we found some outdoor gear, trail cams, and a notebook. He paused. There were names written in it. First names, sometimes partial. Dates. Most had a mark next to them, like yes, no, or crossed out. Your name was in there too. My throat tightened. What did it say next to mine? Another pause. Possible, he said. That was it. Just possible. Like I was a backup. A maybe. Not their first pick. I thanked him and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in that cabin, sitting on the floor, knife in my hand, listening to voices move through the dark like they already knew the layout of the place. The worst part wasn't what almost happened. It was knowing I was on a list, someone else's list, that I'd been considered, measured, and maybe, just maybe, they were waiting for the next time I came back. But I won't. I never will. I never liked cemeteries. Even in daylight, they made me feel weird, like the air didn't move the same, like your own voice came back to you too slow. So when Owen suggested we film at Maple Hill that night, my first instinct was to laugh and say no. But then he raised an eyebrow, like he always did when he thought I was being too careful. Come on, Ryan. 10-minute shoot, tops. I've got the camera, the mix charged, and there's a hole in the fence behind the music building. No one's gonna know. I should have known better. But it was a slow Wednesday, and I didn't want to be the guy who backed out because of some graveyard ghost stories. So I said yes. Maple Hill was just off campus, some 1800s graveyard the school used to own before it became city property. It was fenced off now, closed at sunset, but Owen was right. The chain link behind the music wing was bent just wide enough for us to squeeze through. We waited until after 10, when the sidewalks emptied out and the night got quiet in that small college town kind of way. Owen had his camera bag slung over one shoulder and a tripod in his hand. I brought a flashlight and a half-dead bag of chips, because that's what you do when you're pretending not to be nervous. We ducked through the fence and into the cemetery. It was colder inside the tree line. The gravel path was uneven and choked with weeds, and the headstones rose up like crooked teeth in the dark. Most were old, worn smooth with rain and time. A few still had legible names, Martha, Jedediah, things that sounded like they belonged in a ghost story. Start rolling here, Owen whispered, setting the tripod down beside a mossy obelisk. You do the intro. Why me? Because you've got the scared face. It's more believable. I sighed and stepped into frame. We did 3 takes. The first 2 got ruined when a bird screeched in a tree above us, and I flinched like an idiot. The third one stuck. I stood there with the flashlight under my chin, doing my best spooky voice while Owen panned the camera across the gravestones behind me. He placed a cheap bouquet of plastic carnations at one of the bigger markers. Said it added emotional weight. I rolled my eyes but didn't argue. The whole shoot took maybe 20 minutes. No footsteps. No shadows. Just wind through the branches and Owen whispering camera notes like he was Scorsese. When we climbed back through the fence, I remember actually laughing. Like full-on, relieved laughter. I was so sure that was the end of it. But later that night, when we dumped the footage onto Owen's laptop back in his dorm and started scrubbing through the takes, we missed something. At first it was just a flicker. A second, maybe less. Right behind me. Right near the stone where he'd left the flowers. A shape. Pale. Blurry. Just standing still. We didn't see it while filming. But it was there. I leaned in closer to the screen, my forehead nearly touching the glass. Pause it, I said. Owen froze the frame. What? There. Right there behind me. Near the headstone. You see it. He squinted, then leaned back. Could be lens flare. You had the flashlight out. Dude, that's not flare. That's a... I stopped. I didn't want to say the word. Figure. Person. Thing. The image was grainy, just a few frames, but it wasn't a trick of the light. It was shaped like someone, tall, thin, pale like fog, just standing still behind me. Too far for me to have noticed at the time, but close enough that it should have made a sound. Stepped on leaves. Breathed. And yet, in the video, I never even looked behind me. Just kept talking like nothing was there. Owen hit play again. Let the video roll past that moment. Nothing else weird. No voices, no distortion, no glowing eyes or jump cuts. Just us being dumb college kids with a camera. He sat back and shrugged. Could have been someone else in there. Another student. Homeless guy maybe. In a locked cemetery? He didn't answer right away. Just stared at the timeline, dragging the playback bar back and forth over the same second. The shape never moved. It just appeared and then vanished between frames, like it had blinked into our world for the briefest moment. Eventually, he laughed it off. Either way, we just made our best shot yet. That thing. That's production value. I nodded, but my stomach was tight. I left his dorm around midnight. The hallway felt colder than usual, but I didn't say anything. Just told him I'd see him tomorrow and headed back to my room in Mason Hall. 2 days passed. We didn't talk about the video. Classes got in the way. I had a quiz, he had a lab, and then it was the weekend. I figured we'd edit it Sunday, maybe throw it on YouTube and get 20 views if we were lucky. But Saturday afternoon, I got back from lunch and saw something on the floor outside my dorm room. A crumpled bunch of plastic carnations. Same ones Owen had placed at that headstone. Same cheap stems and faded reds. I just stared at them for a long time, not moving, not breathing. They weren't wet. No sign they'd been outside. They weren't dirty. They looked fresh. And I knew, without a doubt, Owen hadn't brought them back. He never left that bouquet behind. But someone did. I didn't touch them. I just stepped over the flowers and unlocked my door with shaking hands, pretending, stupidly, that maybe they were just a weird coincidence. Maybe someone was pulling a prank. Maybe Owen dropped them off as a joke, though it didn't feel like something he'd do without texting me 5 seconds later to say, "Gotcha." But my phone was silent. I sent him a message anyway. "You leave something at my door?" No reply. A couple hours passed. I texted again. Called. Voicemail. That night, I went by his dorm. Diego, his roommate, opened the door halfway with a weird look on his face. "You seen Owen?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Diego stepped back and opened the door wider. "Not since Friday night. His bed's untouched. Phone's here. Backpack too. He was supposed to help me with a film comp project this morning." I looked around. Owen's side of the room was weirdly clean. His camera case was open on the desk. Laptop closed. Nothing looked wrong, just still. Too still. Then I saw the bed. Laid out perfectly on the folded blanket was the same bouquet of plastic carnations. Only now they were wrapped tight with black thread around the stems, like someone had intentionally bound them together. Diego noticed me staring. "They were like that when I woke up," he said quietly. I thought it was some artsy thing he was doing. You know, for a short film or whatever. My throat felt dry. I didn't say anything. Just backed out and went straight to campus security. They took the report, logged the missing person's notice, called his parents. The usual steps. By Sunday morning, there was still no sign of him. No footage on security cams. No pings from his phone. He'd just vanished. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 2:05 a.m., I got up, stood by my window, and looked out across the campus lawn. In the distance, just above the trees that lined Maple Hill Cemetery, I saw it. A faint glow, pale and flickering, like a candle held by someone walking slowly through the center path. I stood there for a long time. Then I closed the blinds. And I didn't open them again until sunrise. I didn't go to class the next day. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that glow, soft and steady, like it didn't need to be bright to be seen. It didn't flicker like firelight, either. It just pulsed slowly, like it was breathing, like it was waiting. I told myself I needed answers. Not just rumors, not just half-whispers from guys in the dorm saying Owen probably bailed, or went on some spontaneous filmmaker retreat. No, Owen didn't ghost people. He didn't leave gear behind. He didn't bind plastic flowers in black thread and vanish without telling a soul. So I went to his desk. Diego let me in again. I told him I needed to see if there was any footage left behind, anything we missed. He was too weirded out to argue. Owen's laptop was password protected, but I remembered his SD card reader. The camera bag still had one card tucked inside the inner mesh pocket. I borrowed a friend's USB adapter, plugged it in, and opened the file folder. There were 2 clips. The first was our original shoot, Maple Hill, Wednesday night. I fast-forwarded through it just to confirm. Same walkthrough, same flashlight tricks, same frame with the ghostly blur behind me. Nothing new. The second clip was different. It was dated Friday, 11:42 p.m., the night Owen disappeared. I hit play. The video started mid-motion, already recording. The camera shook violently, Owen breathing hard, running between tombstones. I could hear leaves crunching, wind whipping across the mic. He stopped near a large granite slab, the same one where he left the bouquet. The plastic vase was gone. The flowers were laid out in a perfect circle on the ground. Perfect. Too perfect. He looked over his shoulder. The camera followed. In the distance, something moved. A figure, tall, pale, indistinct, stepped between 2 headstones. It didn't hurry. It didn't flinch at the camera. It just stood there, still. Then Owen whispered something I couldn't make out, and the screen glitched, sharp static, then black. That was the end. I sat back, breath caught in my chest. I knew what I'd seen. It wasn't editing. It wasn't staged. Owen was terrified, running, hunted. And that figure? It was real. I copied the file to a flash drive and locked the card back in his camera. I didn't show anyone. I didn't go to the police. I didn't even tell Diego. Because deep down, I already knew what they'd say. It's just a trick of the light. He probably faked it. People don't vanish like that. But they do. And some nights, when the clock blinks past 2 a.m., I still see that faint light over Maple Hill. I shut my blinds when it shows up. Always. Because part of me wonders if it's still out there, waiting for someone to notice it again. And I'm scared one night, it might not be Owen it's calling for. I still don't know why I suggested it. We were just messing around after school like usual. Me, Micah, and Jordan, kicking a half-flat soccer ball near the edge of Mill Creek Park. The sun was low, air smelled like wet leaves and wood smoke, and we were bored in the way only small-town kids can be. It was that stretch of October where everything feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for the cold to hit for real. Then I looked toward the trailer lot, the far end, behind the back row where the brush grows thick, and I said, "You guys ever been down that old path?" Micah stopped kicking the ball. "The dead trail?" he asked, like even saying it was risky. Jordan laughed. "That's not a real thing, man. Just some made-up name from 5th grade. "No, it's real," I said. "There's a path. My cousin said it used to lead to some maintenance road before the town stopped using it. None of us had ever gone back there. Everyone always said it was just overgrown woods and junk. Still, something about that stretch, about the silence behind it, always felt different. And maybe that's why I wanted to go. Or maybe I just wanted to see if the stories were true." We climbed the fence behind the last trailer and pushed through the bushes. The air back there felt colder, damper. The light dimmed, even though the sun was still up. Micah kept swatting at his arms like there were bugs crawling on him. Jordan made dumb ghost noises under his breath, but even he kept glancing over his shoulder. We found the trail easy enough. It was narrow and lined with brambles, like nature had been trying to take it back for years. A strip of cracked asphalt still peeked through in places. It curved left, then dipped downhill, and that's when we saw it. A clearing, a dry creek bed nearby, and in the middle of it all, a round stone well covered in moss. "No way," Jordan whispered. "It's real." Beside the well, half buried under leaves and branches, was what looked like the mouth of a tunnel. Bricks crumbling at the top, wooden beams bracing the entrance, dark as pitch inside. "Dude," Micah's voice was barely there. "This is bad. We shouldn't be here." He was right. I knew it even then. But I couldn't stop staring. There was something about that well. The way it leaned slightly, like it had been watching the trail for a long time. The way the trees seemed to grow away from it, leaving a perfect circle of sky overhead. And somewhere beneath all of it, under the dirt, the leaves, the quiet, I felt it. We weren't the first ones to find this place, but we might be the last. Micah wanted to leave right then and there. Said it was giving him the creeps, that his chest felt tight and the air smelled wrong, like mold and burnt wood. Jordan told him to chill out, tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked halfway through, and he wouldn't go near the tunnel either. I don't know what made me take those extra few steps. Curiosity, maybe. Or that weird pressure you feel when your friends are watching and you don't want to look scared. Whatever it was, I edged closer to the tunnel mouth, crouched down, and shined my phone flashlight into the dark. The beam barely reached 10 feet inside. Just enough to catch broken bricks, tangled roots, and bones. They weren't scattered like trash or the remains of some dead animal. They were arranged neatly, in patterns, circles, triangles. One pile had a spiral built into it, like someone spent time setting it just right. What the hell is that? Jordan muttered behind me. I didn't answer. My eyes had landed on something else. Farther back, half-shadowed against the left wall, was the head of a goat, bloated, fur-matted, one eye gone. Its horns had fraying red string wrapped around the base, tied in tight, deliberate loops. A chunk of flesh was missing from its jaw. The smell hit me then, sweet and rotten at the same time, like wet meat left in the sun. I staggered back, almost dropped my phone. Micah gagged behind me and turned to vomit into the bushes. Jordan froze, his mouth open, breathing shallow. "This is messed up," Micah gasped, wiping his mouth with the sleeve of his hoodie. "We need to go? We need to go right now." I nodded, throat dry. But just before we turned to leave, I heard it. A sound from inside the tunnel. Faint, wet, like something breathing through a mouth full of mud. I don't even remember running. Just the rush of cold air against my face, branches scraping my arms, the sting of thorns across my legs. We didn't talk. Didn't stop. Not until we were back at the fence, panting and wide-eyed and covered in dirt. None of us said much after that. We walked separate ways home, without even a "see you later." That night, I lay in bed fully dressed, lights on, staring at the ceiling like it might start leaking. I thought I heard footsteps outside. A slow, dragging step across the backyard. But when I peeked through the blinds, nothing. Still, I locked the window. Just in case. At school the next day, Micah didn't say a word to me. He passed me in the hallway like I wasn't even there. Jordan avoided eye contact too. I knew what they were doing, trying to bury it, pretend it didn't happen. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The bones, the pattern, the sound, and most of all, that feeling. That something had watched us. And maybe, just maybe, had followed us back. I tried to let it go. For the next week, I kept my head down, did my homework, played it normal. But the memory dug in. Every time I passed the edge of the trailer park or caught sight of Mill Creek through the bus window, my stomach tightened. Micah still wouldn't talk to me. He'd switched lunch tables and started showing up late to first period. Jordan went back to cracking jokes, acting like nothing happened, but he didn't meet my eyes when he laughed anymore. Then one night, I found myself just standing by the back fence again. I don't remember deciding to go. I didn't pack anything, didn't leave a note. I just pulled on a hoodie, slipped a flashlight into my pocket, and crept out the back door while my parents were asleep. The trail was even darker this time. No moon. The wind had picked up, and the trees whispered like they were trying to tell me to turn around. My feet moved anyway. The well came into view first, hunched and crooked like it had been waiting. The tunnel was wider than I remembered. The ground near the entrance had been disturbed, fresh drag marks, footprints I didn't want to look at too long. Then I heard them. Voices, low and steady, speaking in a language that didn't sound like anything from around here. 5 of them, maybe 6. Figures in long robes, hoods pulled tight, standing in a rough circle just beyond the tunnel entrance, near the creek. I dropped to my stomach in the tall grass, barely breathing. One of them stepped forward and reached into the well. They pulled out a black canvas bag, wet and heavy. Whatever was inside moved. I couldn't see it clearly, but I heard it. A soft, gurgling noise that didn't sound human or animal. That was when I ran. I didn't care if they heard me. I tore through the trees, branches slapping my face, something catching my jacket. I didn't stop until I hit pavement. I don't remember the sprint home. Just the front door slamming behind me, and the lights I left on all night. The next morning, my arm was streaked with scratches I didn't remember getting. There was dirt under my nails, and the smell of creek mud still clung to my clothes. I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not my friends. Not even myself. Not really. But every night for weeks after, I swore I heard it again. That wet breathing. Somewhere just beyond the backyard fence. It all stopped about a month later. Not the memories. Those stayed. But the sounds, the nightmares, the feeling that something was waiting just outside my window. One day, it was just gone. Like whatever was watching had finally looked away. I tried to believe I imagined it. that I'd let my mind twist something creepy into something bigger, that the tunnel had always been there, that kids around here had been making up stories forever. But part of me knew better. I didn't plan on going back, not ever, but then my mom had me ride along to visit my grandma one Sunday afternoon. She lives in the old brown house 3 blocks from Mill Creek, and on the way there we passed the trailer park. That's when I saw it. The path was gone. The entire entrance had been bulldozed, cleared out, fenced off. Big metal signs lined the edge, "No trespassing. City property." Fresh concrete filled the spot where the trail used to dip. New fencing glinted in the sun. And the well? Sealed. Not just covered, sealed. Thick metal lid bolted down. Painted gray, edges welded like the town didn't just want to keep people out, they wanted to keep something in. The tunnel was gone too, replaced by a sloped wall of dirt and a steel barrier anchored into stone. Someone had put in real work. Someone knew what we found. I just stood there on the sidewalk, staring through the fence, heart pounding. The trees swayed gently overhead like nothing had happened, like they weren't hiding the truth just a few weeks ago. But the air still felt wrong, like a smell that never fully leaves a room. Then I heard it, barely there, faint, dripping, like water hitting stone in rhythm, one drop at a time. It wasn't loud. You wouldn't notice it unless you were listening hard. But I was. It was coming from under the metal lid. I didn't tell my mom. I didn't ask anyone in town. And I haven't walked near that part of Mill Creek since. Whatever was back there, whatever still is. Someone tried to bury it. But I know the truth. You don't seal something up that tight unless it wants to get out. They came in a box lined with soft red fabric. 2 porcelain dolls, tucked side by side like they were sleeping. Each one had pale, perfect skin, bright blue glass eyes, fur-trimmed hoods, and little leather tassels along their tiny boots. Cradled in their arms were plush wolf pups, stitched with such detail it was hard to tell if they were toys or real. Grandma smiled as she lifted them out. "We found them in a little shop outside Fairbanks," she said, handing one to me and the other to Emma. "Handmade." The woman said they were one of a kind. I took mine carefully. It was beautiful in a way that made me nervous, delicate, cold to the touch, heavier than I expected. The eyes caught the light and held it, like they were about to blink. Emma grinned. "Mine looks like she's guarding something." "Maybe she is," Grandma said with a chuckle. "You girls take care of them." Dad stood nearby with his arms crossed, watching quietly. I saw the way he looked at the dolls, like he didn't trust them. After dinner, when we were carrying our things upstairs, he leaned over and whispered, "Keep them off the stairs. You trip on one of those, I'm blaming Grandma." We set the dolls on top of our dresser, side by side. They looked harmless in the daylight, staring blankly toward the window. But that night, as Emma fell asleep and the room grew quiet, I couldn't stop glancing at them. It was the eyes. Not the color, but the stillness. The way they caught the faintest light from the hallway and seemed focused. Like they weren't just looking out. Like they were looking in. I rolled over and pulled the blanket over my head. "It's just glass," I told myself. But even then, I could feel them, watching. The next morning, Emma swore her doll had moved. "She was facing the closet last night," she said, mouth full of cereal. "Now she's looking at the bed." I shrugged, trying to sound casual. "Maybe you bumped the dresser." Emma shook her head. "I didn't touch her." Dad glanced over from the sink, drying a coffee mug. "You girls starting your own ghost stories now," he said with a smirk. I didn't laugh. After school, I went up to our room alone. The air felt different, heavy, like someone had just left. I stood by the doorway for a second, staring at the dolls on the dresser. They were still side by side, still perfect and still. But mine, she was turned slightly toward my side of the room. Not a lot, just enough. That night, I dreamed I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to move. Something cold pressed against my chest, and I could feel breath on my cheek, slow, even, as if someone was leaning over me. Watching. Waiting. I tried to scream, but my throat wouldn't open. When I jolted awake, the lamp was still on. My heart was racing. Across the room, the dolls hadn't moved. But Emma was standing by the closet. She was asleep. I shut, hand resting against the mirror on the door. I whispered her name. She didn't answer. Just stood there, head tilted slightly, like she was listening to something inside the glass. I eased out of bed and touched her shoulder. She gasped, blinked fast, and looked at me confused. "What are you doing?" I asked. She glanced at the mirror, then back at me. "Nothing," she mumbled. I was dreaming. But when we went back to bed, I stayed awake a long time. And I swear, just before I drifted off again, I saw my doll's head turn the tiniest bit toward me. The next few days got weirder. Emma kept waking up in strange places. Once on the hallway carpet outside our door. Another time curled up in the corner of the room, still clutching her stuffed wolf pup like it had followed her there. She never remembered how she got there. Just said she'd been dreaming about cold places and voices in the snow. I tried to ignore it, but every morning I found something just a little off. The doll's facing a new direction. One of the tiny wolf pups left on the windowsill. A chill in the room that didn't match the thermostat. Then, one afternoon while Dad was at work and Emma was at dance practice, I got brave, or stupid, and picked my doll up. She felt heavier than before. Her porcelain fingers were closed tighter. Her head leaned ever so slightly to one side like she was listening. I turned her over in my hands, looking for a manufacturer's mark or something. Nothing. Just smooth, cold skin. When I set her down, her head rolled slightly on the ball joint, just enough to face me directly again. I backed away from the dresser. That night, the sleep paralysis came back. Worse this time. I couldn't move, couldn't blink, couldn't scream. I was locked inside my body as the air grew thick and a pressure settled over me like a blanket made of stone. My eyes were the only thing that worked, and they were stuck, wide open, staring at the closet. That's when I saw it. A figure, tall, black, and silent, stepped out from the corner and walked across the room. Not in front of the mirror, but into it. Like it passed through the glass and kept going somewhere else. It didn't reflect. It absorbed the light. When I finally sat up, gasping and drenched in sweat, the mirror was empty. But my doll was on the floor, face down. And somehow, I knew she hadn't fallen on her own. The next morning, I didn't tell Dad. I didn't tell Emma either. I just picked up the doll, set her back on the dresser, and tried to pretend everything was fine. But I didn't meet her glassy stare. Couldn't. Emma, though, she looked tired. Real tired. Her eyes had shadows under them, and her hands kept fidgeting with the strings on her hoodie during breakfast. You okay? I asked. She nodded too fast. Just weird dreams. About the cold again? She didn't answer. She just looked at me for a second, then down at her cereal. They see through the glass, she whispered. Even when we're sleeping. I stopped chewing. What? Emma didn't repeat it. She acted like she hadn't said anything at all. Like it had slipped out of her mouth without her knowing. That night, I covered the mirror with a towel. Taped the corners so it wouldn't fall. I pulled my desk lamp to the edge of my bed and left it on full blast. Then I laid there, blanket up to my chin, watching the ceiling. Sometime around 2 a.m., I heard a sound, soft, like fingernails tapping glass. Tap, tap, tap. Then, a slow, deliberate creak. I sat up. The towel I'd taped to the mirror had slid halfway down. The upper half of the mirror was exposed. Nothing in it. Just my reflection and the room behind me. Then Emma's voice, quiet and half asleep. She's looking again. I whipped around. Her doll had moved. It was no longer on the dresser. It was sitting on Emma's nightstand, propped up against her alarm clock, facing the bed. Facing her. My doll hadn't moved. Not physically. But I could feel something radiating off it now. Like heat. But wrong. Like the air around it had weight. The next morning, I finally told Dad everything. About the sleepwalking. The shadows. The mirror. The feeling. The dolls. At first, he did the usual parent thing, bad dreams, maybe too many scary stories, all the hits. But I wasn't crying. I wasn't panicked. I was calm. Dead calm. And I think that scared him more. That night, everything broke. The drawers in our room were yanked open. The stuffed wolf pups were placed in a perfect circle around my pillow. Emma woke up screaming, hands covered in black dust like she'd grabbed charcoal. Dad rushed in, saw the mess, and didn't ask questions. He picked up the dolls, carried them outside without a word, and got the hammer from the garage. I watched from the porch as he laid them out on the driveway and brought the hammer down, again and again. Porcelain cracked. Glass eyes shattered. The tiny wolf pups were tossed into the trash like they were diseased. When it was done, he looked up at us and said, "They're gone. It's over." And for a while, it was. Emma stopped sleepwalking. I stopped waking up paralyzed. The mirror stayed covered, but I never saw anything in it again. Things felt normal. Until 2 weeks later, I was looking for a pair of socks in my drawer when I found it. A single porcelain eye, sitting right on top of my clothes, staring up at me like it had never left. As I held it in my palm, the mirror across the room flickered. Just once. In the reflection, I swear, I saw the faint outline of a fur-lined standing behind me, watching, not moving, just waiting. I was in the middle of mowing the front lawn when they moved in. It was hot, early summer in Michigan, where everything smells like cut grass and the sky never quite decides whether it wants to be gray or blue. The house next door had been empty for months. I'd stopped paying attention to it, really. But then, out of nowhere, a moving truck pulled into the driveway. I cut the mower and watched from behind the handlebar. An older woman stepped out first, gray hair in a long braid, thin shoulders, no smile. Then came a girl, maybe 10 or 11. She had long black hair, no shoes, and carried just one backpack. That was it. No dad, no mom, no siblings. Just the two of them. My mom waved from our front porch, but they didn't wave back. The woman just gave a polite nod and unlocked the front door. The girl, Maya, I'd learn later, stood still at the bottom of the porch steps for a long time before following her inside. That was the first time I saw her. And for a while, the only time. Over the next few days, I barely saw them. The grandmother came out to sweep the porch or collect groceries from a delivery car, but she never lingered. Maya never came outside. Not to ride a bike, not to play, not even to walk down the driveway. I catch glimpses of her through the second-floor window, just standing there, her hands flat against the glass, watching. I tried waving once. She didn't respond, didn't blink, just stared. There was something off about the house. Not messy or broken, just too still. Like it wasn't being lived in, just occupied. The lights never turned on upstairs. The front curtain moved once at 3 a.m. when I went to grab a glass of water. It moved like someone was looking out, then stepped away. My parents said maybe Maya was shy, that the grandma was probably private. They've been through something, my mom said, like that explained everything. And maybe it did. But the longer I watched that window, the more I started to feel like Maya wasn't just watching back. She was trying to tell me something. It happened the following Thursday, just after dinner. I was in my room, scrolling through my phone, when I heard it, this sharp, broken scream that cut through the neighborhood like glass. I bolted to the window. It came from next door. Maya was in the front yard, barefoot, wearing the same oversized hoodie I'd seen her in that first day. She was crying, no, screaming, like she'd just woken up in the middle of a nightmare and hadn't realized she was still awake. But what froze me wasn't the scream. It was that she was looking right at me, like she knew I'd be watching. She stumbled toward her front porch, still screaming, arms out like she couldn't see straight. The door opened, just a crack, and she disappeared inside. The door slammed shut so hard it rattled the windows. Then, silence. No movement. No lights. No one else came out. I stood there, staring at their house, expecting someone, anyone to react. A neighbor stepping outside. A porch light flicking on. But there was nothing. Like the scream had never happened. The next morning, I walked by the house on my way to school. It looked normal. Too normal. The trash bins were out. A package sat on the porch. The curtains were drawn tight. But I felt that same heavy stillness, like the air around it didn't belong to our street. That night, after dark, I waited by my window again. Around midnight, just as I was about to give up, I heard it. The same scream. Same pitch. Same panic. It came from inside the house. But this time, there were no footsteps. No Maya. No door slamming shut. Just that sound, echoing across the lawn. Like someone had recorded it and played it back. The next morning, their house was empty. Not quiet. Empty. No car in the driveway. Trash bins tipped over, one still rolling in the breeze. The porch package was gone, and the curtains were half drawn like someone had left in a hurry. My mom said maybe they moved out overnight, which made no sense. You don't pack up an entire house in the middle of the night without someone noticing. I couldn't stop thinking about the scream. It kept replaying in my head, especially that second one, the one that didn't feel real. I told myself to let it go. People move. Weird things happen. But the next weekend, I was out front raking leaves when a moving truck pulled up 2 doors down. A man in overalls asked if I lived nearby. I nodded, and he said something strange. "You ever see a girl out here screaming?" He asked casually, like he was asking for directions. I blinked. "What?" "Forget it," he said, brushing it off. "Wrong house. Happens sometimes." He walked off like he hadn't just dropped a bomb on me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 a.m., I got up, stood by the window again. This time, the house next door was completely dark. But just as I turned away, I saw something flicker inside Maya's window. A faint light. Then, gone. I pressed my forehead to the glass. That's when I noticed it. In the window across from mine, barely visible through the shadows, was the shape of a hand, pressed flat against the glass. Too small to be an adult's. Too still to be natural. And it stayed there for a long, long time. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, I walked past the house pretending to take the long way to the bus stop. The windows were still, the blinds halfway shut, and the air around the place felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. That weekend, I made a decision. I waited until both my parents were out running errands and grabbed my old flashlight. I crossed the yard slowly, heart pounding like I was trespassing on something sacred. The front door was locked, but the back, where the chain-link fence sagged, was loose. I slipped through the gate, careful not to make a sound. The sliding back door was cracked open just an inch, like someone had left in a hurry and never bothered to shut it. Inside, the house smelled stale. Not dirty, just untouched. Like nobody had been living in it for weeks, maybe months. I crept past the kitchen, all the cabinets bare, the fridge unplugged and open. Just clung to everything. Then I reached the hallway. That's where I saw them, the claw marks. Just beside the closet door, 3 deep scratches ran down the wall, about 3 feet off the ground, perfectly spaced like small fingers. I reached out, touched them. The paint was chipped and flaking. These weren't from a pet. They looked frantic. I moved deeper into the hallway, towards Maya's old room. The door creaked open on its own. The room was almost empty, no furniture, just a broken picture frame lying face down in the corner. I flipped it over. A photo of Maya, smiling beside her grandmother on what looked like their front porch. But someone had scratched the grandmother's face out with something sharp. Then I heard the thud. From the basement. I froze, my hand tightening around the flashlight. Another thud. This one closer. A dragging sound. Something brushing against the wall below. I backed out of the room slowly, not turning my back to the hallway. As I reached the front door, something moved in my peripheral vision, just a blur, like a shadow slipping behind the stairwell. I didn't wait. I ran, all the way back to my house. Slammed the door. Locked it. Pulled the curtains. Later, when my parents got home, I said nothing. But that night, when I went to bed, I left my lights on. And I taped black construction paper over my window. Because I knew, if Maya's window ever lit up again, I didn't want to see what might be staring back.